Chinese writing is amazing. To most people, it seems impossible that hundreds of millions of people have managed to become literate in it, but it's also amazing for other less directly visible reasons as well. Chinese characters have been mostly recognizable and readable for about 2,000 years, meaning that you could find a block of text from thousands of years ago, and while maybe not understanding the meaning, you could probably read it out loud for the most part. And that's not even mentioning the versions which are even older than that. A writing system this old obviously have some interesting stuff in it. So here's a question. What's the most complicated Chinese character? Let's define some terms and discuss basic concepts first, so people who don't know anything about Chinese writing can still understand what I'm talking about. Let's discuss how Chinese characters work. Chinese characters correspond to words or parts of words that are read out as syllables. The character on screen is pronounced ke in Mandarin, but ho in Cantonese. Some characters are extremely simple, like the ones on screen, but not every character could realistically be so simple. These relatively simple characters often fall into a category called pictograms, which are simplified drawings of something, and there are about 600 of them. This doesn't always correspond to their modern meaning, however. The character ye, which in modern Chinese means also, is often said to have originated as a drawing of a vagina. It also might be a drawing of a wash basin, a simplification of another character, or a way of visually representing a grammatical particle that appeared at the end of sentences in older Chinese. But those aren't as interesting. Not all pictograms are so simple, but we'll revisit that later. Other basic characters can fall into the ideograms category. Ideograms are similar to pictograms, but they describe extremely abstract concepts very basically. Now we get into the more complicated character types. A compound ideograph is a character created by taking other, more basic characters and trying to vaguely communicate a different meaning. It's pretty hard to explain, so here are some examples. The word meaning grove and forest are composed of multiple trees put together, communicating the meaning of a group of trees. Rest is a man lying against a tree. Military is a combination of spear and foot. And the character Jian is comprised of 3 women and means evil, adultery, and traitor. That's not very nice, ancient Chinese people. It's a bit sexist, to be perfectly honest. Moving on, some characters from more abstract concepts just stole characters from more concrete things. In these cases, the original meaning was given a modifier known as a radical. The word for was originally mucus, but mucus is now written like this, the same thing but with a water radical. Radicals are pretty important in Chinese writing. Most characters have a radical which gives a vague hint to what the character could mean. Some radicals are for things like speech, water, fire, animals, etc. We still haven't covered the largest category of Chinese characters. Over 90% of characters fall into this category. Phonosemantic compounds. Despite the complicated name, it's not that complicated a system. The characters are comprised of a radical, which alludes to the character's meaning, and a sound component. A similar character, which sounds similar, or did thousands of years ago, which the radical modifies. The radical for hand, plus the sound of white, bai, is pai, meaning to hit. There's only one other thing to talk about before we start searching for huge characters. The fact that there are 2 modern Chinese writing systems. China, Singapore, and Malaysia use what is known as simplified characters, which came about in the 1950s and simplified some complicated characters down. Some relatively complex common characters became a lot easier to write, like ge, which I don't want to have to explain the meaning of quickly, becomes ge. Personally, I'm not a big fan of simplified Chinese. It often looks ugly and some characters become a bit harder to write. It also won't come up very much as it doesn't have many complicated characters. However, in Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, they never did this simplification, and they still use the more complex traditional characters. Most characters in this video will be traditional ones. And with all that information out of the way, let's begin our character hunt. Let's start with this character. It has 1 stroke. If we find more characters with more strokes, they're going to be more complicated. Let's start by looking at radicals. In the most common radical system, based off the ones used in the Kangxi dictionary, there are 214 radicals. Most of these radicals are very simple. By the time we're halfway done with our list, we're only at 5 strokes. I would consider a 9-stroke radical to be the border between simple and more complicated radicals. However, there are some 9-stroke radicals like shou and mian, which I would consider to be relatively simple. The true fun begins after that point, and we can set our hunt right down at the end of the list with what I call the Big Four. Chi with 15 strokes means teeth, Long with 16 strokes means dragon, Gui also with 16 strokes means turtle, and finally Yue with 17 strokes means flute. In the realm of character complexity, I would personally consider anything above 15 strokes to be above average, and above 20 to be highly complicated. The most complicated basic character that a beginner would learn would probably be T with 23 strokes. This is an equal amount of strokes to the second most complicated character in the Joyo Kanji list, a list of common Chinese characters used in Japanese writing. The most complicated character on that list is Yu, at a huge 29 strokes, and means quite a few things, from gloomy to abundant to profound. In Japanese, it mostly means depression. Probably the most common character with more than 30 strokes is Yu to plead, with 32 strokes, and from this point on, character commonness starts to decrease drastically. Probably the most complicated character that still has a conceivable modern use is Nang, which has 36 strokes and means speaking nasally because you have a cold, because there's a word for that. Fun fact about this character, it doesn't have a different simplified form. All the characters I've talked about previously have, but this one for some reason does not. A good way to increase the stroke count is to just copy characters. We saw this tactic earlier with Lin and Sun, so could we do that for more complicated characters? Da is a Chinese character composed of 2 dragons. It only has 32 strokes, but it does show that a character like this can exist. It means flight of a dragon. The extra important thing about this character is that it does have a variant. A variant with another dragon, bringing the stroke count to 48. And actually, there are a few characters that do the same thing 4 times. Bung, meaning thunderclap, uses this to reach 52 strokes. The only thing better than that would be if a character like Long did. Zhe and Zheng are 2 Chinese characters that have 64 strokes. The meaning of Zheng is unknown, but Zhe is actually just a variant of another character, and it means talkative. This might be the limit. There's nothing else you could do, really. And there's no way anyone would put some of these complicated characters together, right? And it is. It is the Chinese character with the most strokes. We've reached the end, right? Taito is a Japanese-only kanji with 84 strokes. As Wikipedia says, it is the most graphically complex CJK character in existence, combining 3 clouds and 3 dragons to make a word meaning appearance of a dragon in flight. This is the end of the line. Are these really it? In 1986, linguist Michael Carr wrote about what he called crystal characters, characters created by stacking the same character multiple times, like we've been talking about. In the part where he describes his method, he says this: in analogy with natural or artificial crystals, natural crystal characters are used in standard written Chinese. Artificial crystals are restricted to dictionary Chinese. Taking Long as an example, the Kokanwa Jiten lists 1 crystal, Da, and this word is attested. On the other hand, the unabridged Daikanwa Jiten lists the same natural crystal along with 2 artificial ones, Da, but with 3 longs, and Ja. These triple and quadruple dragon crystals are graphical ghosts from previous dictionaries, and unattested in actual usage. Did this apply to Taito, however? I would actually consider Taito to be a real character. While it is considered a ghost word, this Japanese surname website I found says that there are about 20 people in Japan who have it as their last name. On top of that, it's also appeared in multiple dictionaries. I think it's real and that it is the most complicated and stroke-intensive character out there. But can we really call these the most complicated? Sure, they have a lot of strokes, but is that really the only metric there is? I don't think many people would consider Gui less complicated than Yue, even though Yue has 1 more stroke. These crystal characters don't really seem that complicated when you break them down. So how far can we go without crystals? Our non-crystal record is currently none at 36, But that isn't by no means the limit. Let's get past 40. At 43 strokes is this absurd thing, another variant character of a rare word meaning park. At 46 strokes is this fucking art gallery of a character. One of my favorite characters here is this one. While not being a crystal, it manages to tie the triple dragon in an amount of strokes. It's an ancient form of a word meaning sound of the wind or typhoon. To get above 50, we have to travel back to Japan to find this horrifying thing used in people's names. It's pronounced iwagura, and it has 52 strokes. And according to Wiktionary, the only two characters with more strokes are the two 64-stroke crystals we talked about earlier. We've reached the true end. Thanks for BIANG. You thought we were done. We haven't even gotten to BIANG yet. This video was sponsored by BIANG. Look at this fucking thing. You see that bullshit title, but it's repeating laziness. And then you see BIANG. BIANG is the most complicated Chinese character. With 58 strokes, it may not have as many lines to write as Zhou or Taito, but neither of those look as striking as this. Biang Biang Mian is a type of noodle in Shanxi. It's mostly known for its amazingly complicated name, and it's gained a lot of popularity solely due to the iconic Biang. What sort of context gives birth to a character like this? Why would you want to continuously write it down on your menu? A theory that seems to make sense to me is that it was invented as a strange way for a noodle shop to advertise themselves, and then it spread and spread, but no one really knows. The character's actual parts seem to all be just gibberish made to make it seem more complicated. But despite all the mystery about this character and the other candidates we've talked about, we can all look back at these horrifying monstrosities of orthography that the Chinese writing system has made and be proud if you're Chinese, or look at them and think they're really cool if you're not. Thanks for bianging.